Hello, I'm here with Alex, who's a student at Syracuse University, and he's here to talk to me today about his views on the U.S. military budget. Alex is pro-military spending and pro-spending more on the military. So, Alex, tell me about your major.
I'm a first-year engineer here at SU. I'm also an ROTC cadet.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so what are your overall opinions on our nation's military budget?
I think it's around where it should be. It doesn't necessarily have to be higher. I think it just needs to be spent more efficiently.
Okay, so are you aware that the current U.S. military budget is $598.5 billion?
I didn't know the exact figure, but I've heard over and over again that it is ridiculously high.
Yes, so the federal budget is about $3.8 trillion. What's that number mean to you?
It's a whole lot of money.
So, of the $3.8 trillion, 54%, which is the $598.5 billion, goes towards the military.
Right.
So, what are your thoughts now?
That does seem like it's a lot per dollar, more than half, but I've heard also that GDP-wise, it's less of a percentage than a lot of countries will spend because our economy is so great. And just massive.
So, yes, I think it's hard for people to put into perspective because these numbers are so big, but this is the kind of money that nations are dealing with. It's not like the $20 that are in my bank account right now.
Right.
So, what do you think we should be spending our money on with this huge federal budget?
I think defense should be our first and foremost priority, especially because in times like these, it seems like a lot of people are kind of out to get us.
Okay. So, like, what exactly? Can you give me an example of, like, the current world situation right now that the defense budget should be our number one priority?
I mean, like, terrorist groups acting against us and our allies and Russia being aggressive in their territories could be a problem in the future.
Okay. So, you have the defense budget as the number one priority. What are some other things that you would consider of great importance to spend money on?
Being from Massachusetts, I'd say infrastructure, because our roads are really bad there. A lot of potholes and, like, two-way roads that are one lane.
Okay, yeah.
It's kind of ridiculous.
That's funny. I'm from Pennsylvania, and it's like that every winter.
Yeah,
so.
It's very bad.
Yeah.
Especially in the winter.
What about, like, anything else, like education or?
Yeah, education's definitely a big one. I'm from a very small town, so we have a really small public education budget, and so we don't have very much technology in our school at all.
Oh, really?
Really.
Well, that's really interesting. I wouldn't think of that, but where in Massachusetts are you from?
A small little town called Leeds, like 4,000 people.
Wow. Yeah, that is quite different. Is it close to Boston?
No, not at all.
No.
It's closer to New York City.
Oh, that's about all I know. Wow. Okay. Well, is there anything that you think that we spend money on that, just in general, in the U.S. that we really don't need to or should cut dramatically?
Not necessarily. I feel like everything that we are spending money on is probably important, even if I can't see the significance of it. Somebody smarter than me knows what it's for.
Oh, yeah. Definitely agree with you on that. Now, how about with the military? I've heard some crazy things about different things that the budget has been spent on. Is there anything that you've heard about that you think we should not or cut back or spend more on?
Yeah, I heard a couple of years ago that, like, military bases overseas were trying to continuously spend their budget to try to keep it up, so they would buy, like, expensive vehicles that would never be used, and especially the Air Force, I've heard, does that a lot, where they buy extra jets that they won't ever use, and that's a little ridiculous, especially being that we're in ROTC. Some of the equipment we have is a little old, aged, so, like, if they could put more money towards that and less towards stuff that will never be used ever.
Yeah, because the way the military works is they get an annual budget and they have a certain time frame to use that. It's funny, I was in Fort Knox, Kentucky this summer, and they actually were ripping out perfectly fine grass to just put new sod in for no reason. I mean, I don't know. Maybe there was a reason, but didn't seem like it. So that is quite an item of interest there. So how does this whole national defense budget personally impact you?
As an ROTC cadet who is 3-year scholarship, it impacts me greatly because that's what my scholarship is based off of, as well as my training and gear and things like that. So I kind of see some of what it's going towards, which makes me a little different than the average American in that regard.
Yeah. So that's interesting. Something a lot of people don't realize is a lot of the U.S. military budget does go towards education.
Right.
For example, a student at Syracuse University. So what do you think if people knew that? What do you think they would think of that? Do you think they'd be more accepting? Like people who are against spending, they'd be more accepting?
Absolutely, especially since I know of the freshmen, a lot of the people who are here wouldn't be able to attend SU because of its price if it were not for the scholarship.
Yeah, that is very true. So now, with this upcoming presidential election, do you side with either Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump on their stances with the national defense budget here?
I'm not very familiar with their stances. They don't really talk about them all that much. But I've heard that Trump is very aggressive towards Russia in particular, and I don't think that's necessarily what we should be focusing on. Like I mentioned before, I feel like that's always a possibility that something would happen with them, but I don't think we should be provoking it in any regard. So I'd probably go with Hillary Clinton just based on the fact that she's not talking about them all the time and being aggressive towards them.
Okay, yeah. So from my research, just basic understanding of what their views both are. So Trump would want to restore the military spending and most likely increase it and increase the amount of soldiers and everything, which definitely increases the budget. And Clinton just would like to either keep it at the same and rearrange how it's being spent exactly, the different amounts per different branches and everything. And that does come with the possibility of her downsizing it, but again, there's no exact plan being put out there. So knowing that now, it kind of seems like you're siding still more with Hillary. I can't say her name. Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, I would say that's true. I definitely don't want her to lessen the budget. Like I said, I feel like if we were to lessen it, it kind of seems like we're saying that we're okay with our soldiers having inferior pay or gear, and I don't think that's a problem unless it gets to the point where someone would say that the money we're spending is worth more than lives, you know? I think that's probably why we have the best military in the world is all of the money we spend on training and equipment, so we don't have to have huge amounts of people to throw at our enemies.
Yeah. So have you heard people ever mention, the fact that the U.S. acts as the world police? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think that we should necessarily be the world police, but I do think it would be right to intervene in some instances, but I think we should have some sort of format to show what we will and won't intervene in, set some sort of precedent. When there's something that's just absolutely wrong, like a dictator killing their own people and not allowing women to go to school, that stuff's wrong. But in more morally gray areas, possibly not.
Okay. Yeah, that's a very interesting point there. So, is there anything else that we talked about that you'd like to add?
Not that I can think of right now.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time, Alex. I really appreciated and enjoyed talking with you.
Of course. It was a pleasure being here.
Hello, I am here with Marshall, who's a student at Syracuse University, and he's here to talk to me today about his views on the U.S. military budget. So, Marshall, can you tell me about your major?
Hi, I'm a I'm a political science major here. I'm a freshman, so this is my first semester, getting used to my classes.
That's awesome. So, are you pro or against military spending?
I'm against military spending, or at least to the extent that the United States does.
Okay. So, what are your general opinions on our nation's military budget from what you know?
From what I know, it's that it's incredibly high compared to even like the second highest nation. We spend a ridiculous amount more than them, and I just don't understand why that's necessary to spend so much more than all of our leading competitors.
Yes, it is quite a lot. So, are you aware that the U.S. or that the current U.S. military budget is $598.5 billion?
I didn't know that it was quite that big. I did know it was a pretty big number, though.
So, did you know that our federal budget is $3.8 trillion?
I did not know that. That's
So,
pretty big, though.
Yes, that is 54% military spending. 54% of that
Oh, wow.
it goes
Actually
towards the military.
That's crazy when you put it like that.
So, what are your thoughts now?
So 54% of every tax dollar, basically. So 54 cents to every dollar is going to the military.
Correct.
That's ridiculously high.
So, how does that make you feel as a taxpayer?
Honestly, I feel like, obviously the military is important, and I'm a supporter of the military, but there's a lot of other things going on in our country at this time. There's a lot of problems going on that, I don't know if the military is 54% worth of all our problems, if that makes sense,
Okay, so what do you think is worth the problems then to be spent on?
To be spent on, well, you have a lot of things coming, like healthcare, border control. Those are just crime, things like that, infrastructure, education. There's a lot of things that you could focus on that I think would have a more tangible effect on the everyday taxpayer than maybe the military.
Okay, what do you think would be your first choice to spend money towards as like the biggest priority for the U.S. right now?
The biggest priority to the U.S. right now. Now, can I say? I think the biggest priority probably could still be national defense, but I don't know if it should maybe necessarily be to that extent.
Okay, so
I think another big topic that we could probably need to focus on right now is probably healthcare. When we compare ourselves to other developed nations, we are very far behind, and that's really unacceptable when we have people who go into debt for the rest of their lives because of an illness or an injury that they had no control over.
That's really interesting. So, if we were to reduce spending, say, on the military budget, you're saying like healthcare. What were the other ones you said?
Education, I think, would be a big one. Infrastructure, probably.
Okay.
And along with that, things like public transportation, that kind of stuff.
Okay, so, but you still agree that the national defense budget is a big priority to us. But what do you think specifically from the military budget, if you know a little bit about the specifics, do you think we should cut first?
Well, it's funny. I was just doing a little research into the uniforms at the military, and because they're transitioning from one uniform to another, and with the old uniform, they spent $5 billion on it, developing it.
Oh, wow.
And so now they're spending like $4 billion to like get rid of it and things like that. So that's just one example of how we're wasting a lot of money on things that, how much does this really matter?
No, I read an article about how much money that the U.S. Army spends on their military bands. And
yeah.
Did you see that?
I did not see that.
No, so I actually had the experience 2 weekends ago, and I attended an event that was sponsored by the U.S. Army, and I kid you not, they had a full-out band with, like, singers singing Frozen songs. So it was quite interesting, but in the article I read, there were some people who were very for it because it builds, like, soldier morale and everything, which I understand to an extent. Like, in World War II, you had the USO girls who were a big thing. But it was an interesting position for the people who were against it because it was a lot of money going towards something that you wouldn't. A lot of people don't know that the military has a band corps.
Much less spends a lot of money on.
Yeah, quite interesting. So, How does the U.S. military budget personally affect you?
It personally affects me. Well, I'm actually an ROTC cadet, so I mean, a lot of our funding comes from the army, from the military. So it affects me in that way. So I guess, I mean, some of our equipment, I guess, is funded by that.
Okay, so like, why exactly is that important to you? Like, you want to have a career in the military.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. That's cool. So, with this upcoming presidential election, do you agree either with Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump on their stances on the military budget?
For the most part, I don't know each candidate's exact stance particularly. I'm pretty sure Donald Trump has been outspoken that the military budget needs to be increased, and Hillary Clinton has probably, like it's traditional with a Democratic position to decrease the budget.
Yeah.
So I guess in this particular instance, I would probably side more with Hillary Clinton. But actually, I don't know their
Okay,
candidates
yeah.
individually.
So I did some research on their views, and so Donald Trump, he wants to restore the military spending and maybe even spend a little bit more. He thinks that we should increase the army size and some of the other, like the Navy and the Air Force too. Like he wants to increase the military in general.
Okay.
Because he believes that right now we're the smallest that we've ever been.
Okay.
So he wants to be able to get us, because he's all about defeating ISIS. But Hillary Clinton wants to kind of, her stance is quite interesting because she wants to cut some of the spending, but like prioritize like certain things within it. So like maybe like shift the way like the amounts of money within each branch and everything. So knowing that, does that? I mean, it kind of reflects what you said before.
I actually, I think the idea of maybe not necessarily cutting funding drastically to the military, but making sure that what we're funding is going to the right places and kind of like switching around where it goes, like you're saying Clinton is for.
Okay.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
So lastly, this is a question I think a lot of people battle with. Do you think that the U.S. should act as the world police as we are, especially with money?
I think the term like world police has a little bit of stigma to it, and it shows that we're trying to control the world. And I don't think the United States should try and do that because that's not really our job. But as essentially the lone superpower in the world these days, I think when like humanitarian disasters and like war crimes and things of that nature and like really terrible things are happening across the country, across the world, it's our responsibility and our duty to try and help out people that don't really have the ability to help themselves.
Interesting. Okay. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
Not really.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Marshall.
Thank you for having me.